class. My name is Jessica Chambers, and I would like to speak today about the cheating emissions scandal by Volkswagen. And this actual particular situation had been happening since 2009, but the actual scandal date was in 2015. Now let's begin with the actual scandal. What actually happened? So, Volkswagen had been promising in advertising since 2009 that they would be producing diesel cars that are better for the environment by having cleaner pollution. Now, this was actually true. These cars were able to have a substantially cleaner pollutant with a certain mode. Now, this mode was actually a part of a two-system cheating device that was actually turned off after the Environmental Protection Agency had finished testing on the vehicle or vehicles. Now, after testing, the cars would actually go back to factory settings where the normal pollutant was actually 40 times greater than the federal legal limits. Now, these cars were abundant. About 10.5 million had been affected, and that was just worldwide. 500,000 cars alone in the US had been affected, and approximately all of those cars had to either be taken off the streets or had their emissions software switched. This actually resulted in a continuance of events with the EPA having to do new testing to ensure that this kind of situation does not happen again. Moving on, we have the warning signs. Now, the warning sign was that the EPA would be doing a testing on Volkswagen in September of 2015. While Volkswagen had known of this testing, the actual settlement or violation did come out to the public during that month. Now, that month was definitely a hard month for Volkswagen because as it came out publicly, all consumers knew that they were being lied to and they demanded a settlement. And so did the government, as it was false advertising and they were polluting over 40 times the legal federal limit. Thus, a 10.5 million amount of cars were affected worldwide, and these defeat devices not only was harming the environment, but it was harming the environment through heavier nitrogen oxide emission known as NOx, which is a smog pollutant that is actually related to causing lung cancer. Now, Volkswagen had promised a cleaner diesel method, but ultimately Volkswagen AG, Audi AG, and the Volkswagen Group of America had been tremendously affected by this situation. Now, the EPA did release a notice to the violation as a failure to comply with the clean air regulations. And with that, a number of consequences came about. But these are actually the cars that were affected. You can see it goes from Volkswagen Jetta, Audi A3 to Audi A8, or even Q5, and even Porsches were affected. The Cayenne diesel Porsche to be exact. Now, As those cars were affected, they were actually listed from the years 2009 to 2016. Now, these cars were passed through the EPA, and Volkswagen did admit to knowingly trying to use these cheating devices only when the EPA was doing their testing, and then setting them back to factory settings where the pollutant was over 40 times greater than the legal limit. During those times, since 2009, Volkswagen had been lying to both the federal government and their consumers about cleaner diesel cars. Thus, the crisis management efforts did begin. Mostly they were forced upon. They did have a huge settlement. The government required 475,000 affected TDIs to be repaired to satisfactory standards or removed completely by June 30th, 2019, which is actually this month. Now, they had been ordered to pay over $1 billion to states alone. Massachusetts, Maryland, and New York are trying to get an extra settlement after the government had already ordered a $10 billion settlement due to them hurting the environment, and to do a buyback program for the cars that were affected and the owners that are affected by it as well. Now, the owners that had sold their cars during this time also were able to get a settlement, but ultimately it was up to the consumers' responses to obtaining their side of the settlement. And there was a number, at least 2/3 of the owners or 3/4 of the owners were able to request this settlement, and 10.5 million had these features worldwide. So there was a number of cars that needed to get fixed. Ultimately, the chief of environmental office, the president, Oliver Schmidt, he was actually sentenced to prison for 7 years and ordered to pay $400,000 in fines. There were actually a number of executives that were also fired, and even an engineer who was sent to prison as well as being fined heftily. Now, the company is definitely striving to continue, which brings us to the next slide. Did it work? Of course, it wouldn't have worked if the company went and had to close down, but they actually didn't have to do that. They're still able to make cars, but you definitely will not find a diesel Volkswagen at any Porsche, Audi, or Volkswagen dealership that makes certified new or certified pre-owned vehicles for diesel. The company actually is still continuing to make efforts to regain their name, as it was pulled drastically. And ultimately, they're now trying to make electric cars. That's where their clean energy is going. And their efforts to do this is basically on concept right now. This is actually a concept car from Germany and China as a combined effort. This is a Volkswagen as well, but the actual VW Vision. Ultimately, this is the best effort Volkswagen can work with right now with trying to produce cleaner energy cars, and they also have to pay $2 billion, like I said earlier, and towards investing in the environment and even gas stations for electric cars as well. I do think that Volkswagen can regain their name. Hopefully the electric cars would be able to do that for them. And I just wanted to say I appreciate everybody watching, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I have one more page. These are my references. Now, thank you for watching.